Welcome to episode number 6 of the State of the Fightings podcast. I'm your host, Jane Harper, alongside Ian Copey. How are you doing, Ian?
Doing great today. Despite last night's loss, we're still riding high with the winner for Wheels movement.
Yeah, obviously heartbreaking news over last weekend with Zach Wheeler, now most likely going to miss the remainder of the season due to a blood clot found in his right shoulder. The Phillies still have not made an official timeline for Wheeler with this injury, but from what it looks like in the time left in the season, looks like he's probably going to be out the remainder of the 2025 campaign.
I know, yes, it really stinks. It's bad for baseball in general to not have this guy pitching, especially when Red October rolls around. As of the time we're recording this, there is still no official ruling or determination on when or if Zach Wheeler does pitch again for the Phillies, whether it's in 26 or if it should be heartbreaking if this forces him to retire. Even though he was only a guy that played for you once every 5 days, his presence and everything he did for this team, and just having that ace on there Red October, it's irreplaceable. But sometimes you still got to have that next man up mentality. A point that I was thinking about, if this does force Zach Wheeler to retire, I would hope that he can stay around within the organization and would would help somebody like Andrew Painter help be a mentor for that sake. But overall, it's obviously heartbreaking. But since then, we've been starting the win it for Wheels movement, and so far, Phillies are 5-1 since it started essentially.
Last night was the only loss since Wheeler's gone down. Since the news officially came out, we were 4-1 before that. After last night's loss to the Nationals. So this again, it sucks that Wheeler is now most likely done for the year. The question is, depending on how long he's down, how much does this change the Phillies' offseason plans? Considering another starter is now a free agent, so Ranger Suarez is a free agent. Say you go into next year without your main guy, and that you lose right now who's your number 3 or 4. So I wonder if this injury, if it does prolong into next season, if it does cause the Phillies to reconsider re-signing Ranger Suarez or even calling up Andrew Painter early next year.
Yeah, it does. As you say, yeah, it does obviously change a bit of a off-season game plan. For a bit's sake, I would think the likely idea is to use. I would say Andrew Painter call up. I believe, even though he has struggled this offseason in Lehigh Valley, I believe with his level of talent and the expectations for him, I sort of believe it could be a case where he is one good offseason of work away from tuning into the guy that, hey, this is the first round pick we drafted, and that's going to bounce back from Tommy John surgery, of course. Now the Phillies, now Dave Dombrowski might go down the road of, hey, they might have already, with Jesus Luzardo, they might have already had the buffered plan of, hey, now if Rangers market is too bad, maybe they keep him, but I think if he finds himself getting an offer from a decent team, he'll probably take that spot instead. I still don't expect the Phillies to offer Ranger Suarez a lot of money, but who knows? That could change in the next month and a half if we get, let's say, first half Ranger instead of what's been his second half self that has not been as good, obviously, since last year and this year.
In between him, Sanchez, and Luzardo, they all stepped up over the series against the Mariners, the first series, full series without Wheeler. Monday night was the start for Ranger Suarez, who he got the win in the start. He gave up a couple extra runs, and that was due to Jordan Romano allowing a home run. So those are inherited runs. But he only gave up 2. He had 10 strikeouts in 6 2/3 innings pitched, no walks, and 4 hits. So that was one of his better starts, honestly, of the year. In the second half, Ranger Suarez has been an issue for the Phillies over the years. That was probably one of his best starts of the year this year. And then Tuesday was a similar story when it comes to Christopher Sanchez, and we'll talk about him more later, but he has a case for Cy Young, I think, this year, considering what he's done and how big he's been to the success of this team this year, especially now with Wheeler down. I think he's at least second right now, and I'm interested to see what happens with Paul Skeens in Pittsburgh, if they're going to shut him down the rest of the year or not, with Pittsburgh being out of it again. But Christopher Sanchez on Wednesday night in the win, he did not take the win. The bullpen gave up some runs, but he gave up 2 runs. He only gave up 1, 12 strikeouts, 2 walks, 6 1/3 innings pitched. So another incredible outing from him. And then maybe the best outing of the 3 was on Wednesday when Jesus Luzardo shoved. He got the win, one of his best starts. in a while. 6 innings pitched, 3 runs, 3 hits, 1 earned run on a home run on a pitch that was at Julio Rodriguez's knees, and 12 strikeouts. So the pitching staff for the most part has really stepped up since Zach Wheeler has gone down. Walker struggled last night against the Nationals, but again, that's something to see how the Phillies will adjust their rotation plans going into October. Now, if Wheeler is going to be down for the year, does this mean that the rotation in the postseason, at least for the first 3 games, is all lefties? Do you go Sanchez, Suarez, Luzardo, or do you throw Aaron Nola in there, who's making his second start the day recording this? So that's tonight against the Nationals. He's making his second start since coming back from the IL. First start didn't go as great, but this is his first start at home since the middle of May. So that will be something to watch tonight and down the stretch, is how the Phillies manage their bullpen and their starting rotation.
Yeah, obviously, I must have said this last time. First off, though, that Luzardo start, that home run to Julio Rodriguez, that thing almost hit Rodriguez dead in like the lower shin. I was still like baffled how that ball wasn't even like just grounded foul. So props to J Rod for that home run. Completely unlucky. But yes, as you mentioned, not Luzardo, Aaron Nola. This is the guy again. This is the Phillies veteran. It's the narrative we've been pretty much making ever since we knew he's coming back. He's obviously your veteran. Before he went down, he showed flashes like no, he is still capable of throwing good pitches and finding ways to cook and put up a good start. Just if he has his command, obviously. Like that Washington game, that was just. I mean, I was really feeling happy for him after those 2 innings, and then that third inning came along. I didn't even really hate the command of his pitches. Like he was just painting them properly. I just think the Nationals found a way to really figure it out. So maybe that's an sort of a philosophical thing that him and Caleb Cotton go over. Like, hey, how can we make sure guys don't solve any potential pitch count sequence patterns? But either way, he's just a guy. Aaron Nola's a guy. Like you just depending on how he does, whatever the role is for him in the playoffs. I wouldn't mind if they used him in. As of right now, I wouldn't mind if they moved him to the bullpen and just use him as, hey, you're going to be like our 1 inning guy if we need, or 2 inning guy if we need somebody to help mop up, or if it's potentially, yeah, like, hey, you are game 3 starter right here. So yeah, it's obviously just show up in the moment.
Well, this year has definitely been a struggle for Nola. 6.92 ERA in 10 starts. He missed basically the whole summer with the injuries he was dealing with. In the postseason, though, it feels like it's a little bit of a different story. The ERA is high, but when the Phillies have needed him, he's come through. Really in 2022 and 2023. Last year, he had to battle through 5 innings in New York, and it didn't go well. With the Phillies losing that game and the rest of the series to the Mets, but it's been him and Wheeler who've been, and Ranger Suarez, who've been guaranteed spots in the rotation in the postseason throughout the last 3 years. Obviously, realistically, no more Wheeler. It'll be interesting to see how Rob Thompson and the Phillies decide to manage it as we go down the stretch in between. Is Nola more of a bullpen guy? And for example, you put Taijuan Walker in the starting rotation, or do you go with Nola as a starter in the rotation because he has the experience over a guy like Jesus Luzardo or Taijuan Walker? Or, it's going to be interesting to see how the Phillies decide to work it this postseason if they are because they are realistically looking at one without their bona fide ace.
Obviously, I'll trust Rob Thompson. I guess Dave Dombrowski will probably be also involved in that decision of what is our playoff rotation. I mean, it might depend on the opponent essentially too. If it's a more lefty hitting team, they might go with a refurbished Nola or Walker in that mix over a guy like Luzardo. Again, the Phillies, they do not need a fourth starter in the playoffs until what would essentially be game 4 of the National League Championship Series, because obviously we're on TBS this year, so we get the extra off day. But yeah, it's a decision that it's Ruben Amaro Jr. would call. It's $1 million question at the moment. And so, but either way, as much as the starting pitching has been complimented in this win for Wheeler movement so far, this offense, it's almost besides last night, bona fide freaks during the Seattle series, having with a team batting average in those 3 games of .417. And do you remember how many hits combined it was, Jaden?
It was 48 hits for the Phillies over the 3 games against the Seattle Mariners. And on all cylinders, the Phillies were hitting. Game 1, absolute domination for the Phillies, winning that one by a score of 12 to 7. They had 22 hits. And on Monday night, it was the first time since 1963 that all Phillies have a hit through 2 innings. So everyone in the Phillies lineup had a hit through the second inning on Monday night. Tuesday night was a little bit of a slower night, but it still had a Schwarbob and JT Realmuto, who's been scorching hot. He hit the game-winning home run in a 6-4 win. And then on Wednesday is when the team just went off. Trea Turner had an incredible game at the plate, going 5 for 6. Schwarber with 5 RBIs. Bryce with a hit. JT had a hit. Again, everybody in the lineup with a hit, who started the game. So, the team, and they've shown this throughout the years, when they're hot, no one is really better than them at the plate. Um, but the question is the consistency, having to keep that up throughout the season, throughout going, from now until the postseason, right? And then into the postseason. You want to get hot at the right time. Winning games now is nice, but it's more important in October, especially, the Phillies have a 6-game lead over the Mets in the National League East right now. And they also have either a 1 or 2 game lead over the National League West right now, with the Dodgers and Padres being tied for first in that division. So at the end of the day, I think the Phillies, they're getting hot, but they also need to get hot when it matters. If they could keep this up from now until, November, which they won't, that would be great. But realistically, they won't. So you don't want to get a cold patch when it matters like they did last year. That's exactly what happened last year. And they went home, sorry. And they went home early during the postseason, losing to the Mets in the National League Division Series. So if the Phillies, it's all about getting hot at the right time. Real Muto has been on fire recently. Bryson Stott has been on fire recently. Trea Turner, he's making himself a dark horse MVP candidate. He has the second most WAR in the National League, only behind Shohei Ohtani. He's been on fire recently. Kyle Schwarber's done it all year. Bryce Harper is starting to heat up. He had 2 home runs over 440 feet each on Monday night. So the Phillies, if they could do what they're doing right now when it matters, they're going to win the World Series this year.
Obviously, it's the point we've been making at almost every episode. Yeah, about getting hot at the right time. That's a big point I made with really after the trade deadline, was how crucial it is to win a championship team, supporting cast wise. Bryce Harper and Kyle Schwarber, how are they're going to get approached in the playoffs now. So that means you need guys in the lineup who, let's say, they need to come up clutch. Let's say Harper's getting walked almost every other at bat or not getting pitches in the strike zone. So I look at guys like, yes, JT Realmuto, been hot lately. Alec Boehm, he's in a big spot in the lineup, hitting in the 5th hole. Bryson Stott, having a 9-hole hitter that's not going to be like an automatic out like a Johan Rojas was in 23, or really anybody in the lineup last year, that can be crucial. Setting guys up for the top of the order. Brandon Marsh, obviously, he's cooled down recently, not been his former self. Hopefully, he can get back on pace. Obviously, nobody was going to hit. He wasn't. Brandon Marshall wasn't going to hit like 300 from May all the way to October. But hey, it'd be nice to get him back on track. We needed the most because he's likely going to be a common starter unless we're facing multiple left-handed pitchers if he's a potential a platoon player, pinch hitting later in the game. But then obviously Harrison Bader, he has obviously his offensive numbers wise since he got here not ideal. He's been obviously in a platoon role player, so he's not starting every day, which I don't believe does him many favors, going from a converted starter to now playing 4 times a week, starting 4 times a week player. So again, it's just, will these guys show up in the moment like they need to? Because as we say almost every episode now, it's not the best team, it is the right team that takes the distance. Any other players, Jana, you think that we should be looking to in the postseason?
Well, I'm looking at, the Phillies roster right now, and only 2 guys on the roster right now who are like everyday guys or platoon guys have under a 700 OPS, which is that's really, really good. It's Stott. He has a 699. So if he has a good game tonight, he'll be over the 700 mark. And Max Kepler, who's been hitting balls very well recently, he's a 676. But besides that, everyone else has over a 7 OPS, and most of them are even over 750, close to 800, right? So the Phillies right now, in between, will take, I feel like the hitting is the easy part. I feel like the funniest thing is the biggest concern is the starting pitching with the Phillies at this point, I think, without Wheeler, because obviously you have a guy like Christopher Sanchez. You know what you're going to get from Christopher Sanchez, but that's only one game. Ranger Suarez has had his ups and downs this year. Jesus Luzardo has had some very high highs and very low lows this year. Aaron Nola hasn't been his main self this year. So, that's the 3 other games or 4 other games in a series that you're not sure what you're going to get from your starting pitching. Can Christopher Sanchez be the ace for this team? Yes, he can, and he is right now. And again, like I said, I think he has a case for Cy Young. When you look at the stats in between him and Skeens, he's pitched basically the same amount of innings in less games. Skeens has started 2 more games. His WAR is up there in the National League when it comes to starting pitchers, and Christopher Sanchez is he's making himself a really good case to become the National League Cy Young if he keeps it up throughout the rest of the season. He starts Monday in New York. If he could keep this up throughout the rest of the year, he has a really, really good case to be the National League Cy Young this year. But besides that, the biggest question is who's going to step up when it comes to the starting pitching. There's always one guy who steps up for a championship team that you won't expect. Last year, Tommy Edman in the National League Championship Series was the NLCS MVP on the team with 5 or 6 different MVPs, right? So the biggest thing for the Phillies is, looking through and see who you think is going to make a big difference in the playoffs. That's what it's going to come down to. We won't know that until it happens. But right now, it'll be interesting to see how the rest of the year goes, who's getting playing time, platoons, and obviously the starting pitching, what goes on with that.
For sure. You mentioned, obviously, yeah, Christopher Sanchez, possible Cy Young. I believe there might be a case where if Skeens just can, if Pirates sort of use Skeens as just like a 5 inning guy, because I think unless there was some sort of health issue with him, there was no real shot that they can shut him down because they need a reason to sell tickets every 5 days at PNC Park, even though it is a beautiful stadium. You really only play that's worthwhile coming out to see nowadays over in the 412. And I think if there's also could be a scenario like we saw the Christopher Sanchez All-Star snub. Well, he doesn't sell as many jerseys as Paul Skeens does. If they finish with similar stat lines, we'll give it to Skeens instead. So, but hey, either way though, one of those guys will be pitching in the playoffs, and the other one won't. So, be nice to maybe Christopher Sanchez, left-handed pitcher, repeat. Let's say Cole Hamels type MVP, World Series MVP run in 2008. Now, obviously, you brought up also Max Kepler. The unlucky lineouts, they're starting to drop for him now. You love to see it. I really forgot about that vision of his. I mean, you look at his batting average in the season, like, oof, yeah, it was getting pretty just ugly in midsummer. Then you look into expected numbers, more peripherals. It's like, yeah, he's just making a solid contact. So I see the vision that they're going with. I mean, I guess you do what you got to do, and there's no real way you can just automatically just replace him like that because hey, we're past the trade deadline now. But obviously, Max Kepler's another dude that we didn't expect, but hey, he's gonna be on the postseason roster and in the postseason lineup. So that's
At
another
this
guy.
point, it's hard to take him out of the postseason lineup and of the lineup just in general. Over the last 15 games, he's batting a 288, a 758 OPS with 2 home runs and 8 RBIs, 15 hits, scored 11 runs. So he has really turned his season around for a guy who everyone probably, most fans wanted him off the team. Most fans wanted him gone by August 1st. But the Phillies keeping Max Kepler might be one of the best decisions they make because he feels like a guy who he would be coming up big in a situation at some point during the postseason. He feels like that Matt Stairs type of like pinch hitter
Mm,
type who'd come in a big at bat and get a big hit for the Phillies, and that just feels like what his role might be when we get to the postseason. And even I think he has a very good case to be playing against right-handed pitching. Obviously, the Phillies have been testing that out. We don't know what's going on with Castellanos, whether it's an injury issue or a performance issue. But Max Kepler has been working against right-handed pitching. So I think he has a spot in the postseason, whether when it comes to A, starting games, and then B, even pinch hitting.
for sure. And yeah, the Nick Castellanos thing. That's people questioned last night whether he should have been like if you saw that ball, Cruz hit the other way, and Castellanos had to slide down to get it and throw it to second. Almost people say it extended to a double. I didn't think it was that crucial a play. Some players may let that go to the wall. I think other play. I think you have a better fielder out there. We'll get to that standing up, and maybe you have a potential bang bang play at second with Cruz. either way, what happened happened. I hope that there is a realization if there potentially postseason where the Phillies consider. Like I have no idea if Johan Rojas is coming back to the team, but there could be a shot where if any potential injury or a potential guy that goes down, they might just bring back Rojas just for the sake of his defense and just to keep in the playoffs if he continues to hit pretty well in Lehigh Valley. Obviously, no, you don't. You see, there's really nobody you see on the roster currently that's like, yeah, that's the guy. Unless maybe a potential Weston Wilson fall off or anybody or a potential like God forbid another season-ending injury for a position player. But Johan Rojas is a guy I think if you could have Bader and Rojas in the ninth inning of a to close out a playoff game with Duran, you give yourself a defensive advantage obviously in the outfield.
Yeah, you do. And obviously, we have about 9 days until September call ups. So the rosters will expand by two spots. Usually it's a pitcher and a hitter. I would have to think Rojas is the guy coming up from AAA. He's been mashing the ball there. He's changed his stance up and everything. He's been hitting really well down in the minors. So I would think they probably recall him. Obviously, I don't know what happens with Weston Wilson because his playing time has kind of, disappeared over the last couple of weeks because he hasn't been playing as much. He was good at platoon against lefties. He hasn't really been doing that. So I don't know what his future looks like. I don't know if, in the cards, is there Otto Kemp recall in between now and the September but and the end of the season. So it'll be interesting to see what the Phillies decide to do at those September call ups. When it comes to their roster and their outfield, really the outfield and what they decide to, because the infield is set. There will be an occasion Mundo Sosa will, like today, he will probably be in the lineup over Bryson Stott with the lefty Mitchell Parker on the mound. Um, but in general, he might not always platoon with how good Stott has been. And, he hit the game tying home run yesterday. Um, and the infield I would say is set, and catching is the outfield is going to be the questions that we see going down the stretches. Who's going to be playing where when it comes to October?
For sure, for sure. Now, obviously, we've been talking a lot about October this episode, but I mean, let's look at this current series. That obviously, Philly they dropped Game 1 of the Nationals last night. Jahan Duran, we made the point as we were actually watching the game together yesterday about how if Duran, if he's perfect for the Phillies this entire regular season, that might set up a disaster for the playoffs. That could just be, I mean, I call it superstitious if you want, but it was not everybody can be like 2008 Brad Lidge going perfect, perfect. So Duran, whatever, he was going to give up a run at some point. It's bad defense, frustrating loss, but we move on. Obviously, Mitchell Parker today starting for the Nationals. He's a guy that I believe the Phillies have a very much chance of just beating up, potentially get him out of the game, and I don't know within the first 3 innings. And obviously, Aaron Nola on the mound. Hopefully, this is a guy that lasts more than 3 innings tonight. So obviously, his last start was last Sunday on Roki against the Nationals. Again, what can we see? Can we see something better from him tonight? If they don't have him solved. Tomorrow we have Jake Irvin against Ranger Suarez. Get back to the danger. That's just the idea of this current series. And
Well, yeah,
obviously,
and this is now the third time this season that Mitchell Parker and Aaron Nola will be facing each other on the mound. Faced opening weekend in DC, and last Sunday they were also opposed on the mound. So now tonight they will be. Parker's always struggled against the Phillies. The Phillies have seen him well. I don't know if you probably remember last season when Weston Wilson hit for the cycle and the Phillies scored, I think, either 12 or 13 runs in that game. That was against Mitchell Parker. Last weekend they scored a lot of runs. That was against Mitchell Parker. But he did shut them down earlier this season in DC. It would be big to see if they could get back on the board, uh, at least have a chance to win the series tomorrow with Ranger on the mound, especially after the Mets beating the Braves last night and most likely going to win that series before the big matchup in New York early next week, Monday through Wednesday, which will really highlight what the Phillies and Mets really look like because they haven't played since June.
yeah, the Mets haven't. Yeah, it's been since late June since the Mets, Phillies and Mets last played. And Major League Baseball knew what they were doing when they scheduled some crucial series. What they have 7 games against the Mets in this final month and a half of the regular season. So obviously, yeah, big series there in Queens. Yeah, you hope, and that's a series that the Phillies only come away with, what 2 out of 3, or lose 2 out of 3. I find as whatever, still hold the division lead. A point I've been thinking about: the Mets are really starting to remind me of last year's Phillies, where you had this spark at the beginning of the season where they started. What was it? Almost like 45-17, and then later you get into the dog days of summer and you lost that spark. You obviously had a few injuries here and there, but the Mets, they're just, you see them struggle, tumble into these long, these painful losing streaks, and some of these just these bad losses every night. And then they wake up a little bit. Hey, no, they big good win there and big win there against like the Seattle. So you think so I'm thinking the Mets could be a team that they oh yeah they stumble their way into October and then wiped away immediately. I try to, I'm obviously I'm not trying to be biased against the Mets here. I hate the Mets more than any other team in baseball, but it's looking what they're reminding me of currently. And who knows? It could be Carlos Mendoza. I'm not saying Mendoza should be on the hot seat for that, but it could be a sense like is there a leadership problem they have there? Like who's not getting the spark? A they had Iglesias last year who provided a huge spark. I mean, was it annoying? Yes, as a Phillies fan. But hey, you saw it, and hey, that sometimes just those stuff that unifies the whole team is what gets the guys going, and they almost got the job done in October last year. So, but it's not. I'm not feeling the same vibes from this year because obviously it's what we saw from the Phillies last year. We didn't really see the dog in that team or just any real energy coming from like radiate from them as you got in from August into September, and then you came into October, and yeah, no explanation needed.
Yeah, well, the hope is that obviously, I would say first hope is that we don't have to see the Mets when it matters in the postseason. Uh, Even if we do, though, I feel like the Phillies, I think they know more now what they're working with than what they did when they played them last year. 'Cause that was actually the first time in either franchise history that they've played each other in the postseason. And again, I don't think the Mets aren't as hot uh, now as they were then. Obviously, things could change in a month. I think it will be good for the Phillies to see them, 7 times over the next 2 weeks to really get a sense. They had, the last time they played the Mets were in first place in the division. Now they're 6 games back, and they're fighting for their lives in the wild card picture. So it will definitely be good to see the Mets before obviously the season ends, and Phillies have this stretch now of division games, finishing up the series with the Nationals, then the Mets, and then the Braves, and then they go to Milwaukee, and then Miami. So, this next couple, 2 weeks is going to be a good test when it comes to divisional games, and it's going to be important for the Phillies' success, I think, coming down the stretch.
Very much so. And I'm to any other points. Obviously, yeah, division. It's fallen out. It's fallen out of reach for the Mets. Obviously, the Phillies didn't have to deal with sort of something like that last year because they were almost up like what was it, 20 games, in after the first half. They were no, until like July. So yeah, they never lost a hold of the division lead. But again, it's just where's the Mets leadership? And obviously, yeah, I'm sort of repeating myself with that, but it's just, you need a spark this time of year. It's not there's nothing that you'll find on paper or how many or peripherals or nothing. It's just when you look at the team and they just need. Obviously, I wouldn't want to help New York, but hey, I believe that's what they're currently missing right now, and I think the Phillies need to find a way to take advantage of that. Find a bring in a Mets team that just doesn't have the energy, and don't let them try to create any energy in this upcoming series
And
against yeah, in Queens.
But the best thing at the end of the day is that the Phillies kind of control their own destiny. It's have a pretty tough schedule down the rest of the way. These they have some tough matchups. But for the most part, their schedule kind of comes back, to earth against teams that are either fringe playoff teams or teams that are completely out of it. Sold at the deadline and everything. That's Arizona, Miami, Kansas City. They play teams like the Dodgers. They play teams like the Brewers, obviously the Mets, but they play a team like Atlanta. So it'll be important for them to win the games they're supposed to win against these bad teams, and also they've done well against the Dodgers. They've done well. It would be good for them to do well against the Mets. They won the season series last year. Didn't matter, but they've always historically struggled against the Mets. The Mets have never been, you know, a good opponent for the Phillies when it comes to the Phillies winning. So it'll be important for this series, this upcoming week, the 3 games in Queens, and then when they come to Philadelphia for 4, it will be important for the Phillies to capitalize against the Mets. And really, this is one of their biggest tests they've had in a little bit.
For sure, for sure. Well, with that point there, I would say we've covered a lot for today's episode. Hopefully, next week will not be as delayed to the weekend. But next, when we return, though, the Phillies will have pretty much dove deep more into this stretch of divisional games. Which I mean, it's a point I make every year. Win your divisional games. You play 52 of them a year, and it's something you want to win at least probably 32, 35 to 35 of them. So, but yeah, with that. I would like to say thank you guys for listening today, and I'm one of your hosts, Ian Copey, along with,
Jane Harper.
and we'd like to thank you guys for listening to today's episode, and obviously, go Phils.
Go Phils. We'll see you in the next one.